Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be taking a look at Bioripple. This is a book that was put out by Heavy Metal from the artist and writer Nir Levie. Nir sent this over to Sean and I as a PDF a while ago, before it was coming out from Heavy Metal, and I think I read the whole thing in PDF format. I do remember when I was reading it as a PDF, I had a little bit of trouble following the story because there's a mechanism in there that it took me a while to latch onto. It took me about a chapter to figure it out, so I was kind of confused. Also, just reading in the PDF, and I think if I remember correct, a lot of the PDF was presented as two-page spreads because there are a lot of spread images in here, and you really need to see the work as spreads because there's all kinds of cool stuff going on with, as you can see right from here. There's this curvilinear, like 4 or 5 point perspective going on here that makes this book really interesting to look at. But in a PDF with having a zoom and kind of a funny like format to the book, I'll admit that like I like the book, but it just kind of gave me a headache. It really on the tablet kind of gave me a headache. I think a CBZ file, I could have read okay, but the PDF format was just really hard to read. So I liked it, but we didn't really have anything to show, and I don't know, we just kind of forgot about it. And then Nir was kind enough to send along two copies. He sent one or two to Sean, and then Sean forwarded this one to me. And so I got a chance to revisit it in the format it's supposed to be seen in, kind of knowing what the mechanism is. And then I really, really enjoyed this book. Really, really enjoyed it. So I preface all that by saying that you're going to be looking at this on screen, not reading it. And it may be headache inducing on screen. I'm not sure. But it is a really cool book. And the more I read it in the physical format, the more I enjoyed it. And the more of the subtleties of what was going on in the story I was able to catch as well, because I wasn't kind of grappling to figure out what the hell was going on. So in this book, there is still some ambiguity about exactly how everything in the world works, but it's in a way that is fun and interesting to me, and I can piece most of it together. So you have Emily is this character. She is a what's called a teacher cop, which I don't know exactly what that means. It seems like this is a future world where pretty much everyone is a teacher. I think that's what it is. It's a world, definitely a world where AI has taken over. No one works. It's the kind of thing that me and Sean have been like fussing about for the last year. So I get why Nir was like, hey, you guys got to read this, because he's basically describing the world that we've been talking about. But it's a world where seems like everyone's a teacher to some extent. And at least Emily is some kind of cop who works for the government. Whatever the AI, which is, they call it Geo. I don't know if that's her specific AI or if that's the AI system, but I think the AI system is called Geo, and it's obviously plugged into their head and talking to them at all times. So you always have two tiers running. You have Emily, and they'll switch. Emily will be up top or up bottom, and is always kind of in the greens and purples. And then Tim, who's a teacher, he teaches about architecture, even though he's not an actual architect. He's always kind of in these purples and red, orange, yellow kind of scope. So you're kind of splitting the color spectrum from purple, and you're going this way on this one and this way on this one visually, which makes it easy to differentiate the characters. But what makes this extra difficult to look at is when you're in this Emily mode, you're always seeing it from Emily's point of view. And when you're in Tim's mode, you're always seeing it from Tim's point of view, except when Nir needs to show one of their expressions, then you'll have these floating heads. So this book has like its own kind of visual language that you got to get used to. And like I said, reading it on the tablet, I just got lost, and it gave me a headache. I had to read it like 10 pages at a time, which I think is part of the intent, actually, that this kind of overwhelming amount of information that's on the page, it's almost like the Trad Moore. Like when you look at the way this nose is drawn, this face is drawn, it's like Trad Moore, then with like Jeff Darrow level of shit on the ground and on the wall, and tagging everywhere. It's very visually overwhelming, and so that gets across to me the same kind of overwhelming nature that it would be living in this society. And you can see every panel's in some kind of 4 or 5 point curvilinear perspective. There's nothing that's ever just in like straight lines. It's always curved lines. So it's meant to feel very immersive, but you oftentimes get lost. But in not lost, but it takes a second to get a hold of that. And then you have to really slow down your reading to track all of the action, to try and piece out who the readers are, especially in some scenes like this where the characters see themselves reflected. There's always, like here, you see this black ball reflected and the cockroaches around it, which is never really explained. I assume I know what it is, but there's always something like that that will cue it into you that you're looking at a reflection, but it just takes a while to parse through. So it's very information rich and dense, but this is about a society that's dense and littered and information rich, so it makes sense. Here's another one of those mirror images, and you get multiple times throughout the story where the two viewpoints sync up, and that is very, very cool, but also it took me a second at least to latch onto. So here you're seeing Emily chasing someone, and then you're seeing Tim running up to the window, and then you're seeing Emily like going after this guy, jumping over a thing. So her legs and hands show up as she jumps over this pod that crashes in front of her. And here you're seeing Tim see the same situation through the window, but from like a second later once she's landed. So there's a lot of really, really cool animated type of storytelling with a real good sense of timing throughout the book to be able to plan all of these, and obviously a masterful control of like perspective and just the idea of camera placement and tracking motion and all that type of stuff throughout the whole book, because everything always winds up feeling like it's in the exact place that it should be relative to the other perspectives you've seen. So in this scene where Emily and Tim are both watching Emily try and capture this guy, we get this third character who shows up that I never caught a name for, but this character is basically the leader of a revolution. I think the revolution is called the Manifold, but the Manifold also might just be what the internet's called. That's what I'm saying. There's definitely some stuff where they don't over-explain the world, and that's fine. But there's some kind of revolution going on. This is supposed to be a utopia, but obviously, as all utopias are, it's a dystopia. They're still at underground and all this stuff. One of the big things in this society is that everything's AI assisted. So here you have Tim, and he's lecturing. And again, this is a thing where I wasn't quite sure if he's the teacher to the class. That seems to be the implication throughout the book, is that he's the teacher and he's going off of the syllabus. But there's also a few suggestions here and there where it seems like the class might be everyone's contributing. I'm not quite sure. It's hard to tell. But also, AI is a big part of this world. AI assisted design. So he's supposed to be lecturing about AI assisted design, and he wants to talk about Vitruvius. And there's AI assisted almost everything, and that's where some of the sense of the information overload comes from. He also is basically talking to his students and giving them some facts, and one of the students says, "That's just information. We don't need a lesson for plain information with no analysis." And that's actually, I like that. That is where education should be headed. I'm seeing more and more that, students have endless access to information. They can look up factoids all they want. It's what do you do with it? And so the fact that this student or whoever else is co-teaching the class, I'm not sure, is challenging him to provide more analysis and not just more information is actually, in my estimation, making a good ask, and that kind of gets his attention. And then throughout, there's also the image of this woman in a tree that comes up that's not really explained until the end, so we'll get back to that. We find out that Emily has a brother, Kai, Kai, who has died. She talks to her mother about it, and that's an important part of the story, because another part of this world that you start to learn about is that there's something called hopping, and hopping's not totally explained either, but I think what it is, and I think my best estimation of what the black ball with the cockroaches is the black ball is how they hop, and I think the cockroaches is what you can hop into or out of. But I think hopping is basically just swapping places, like taking a ride on somebody else to escape. But when you do that, you like displace the person and kill them. So I think they have the cockroaches around because then they can hop on the cockroach and not worry about the ethics of it. But I'm not sure. It never gets a real full explanation. But it seems like her brother Kai had been hopped, and that like his data that makes up him has been stored on a box. Here you get where I think Tim is being initiated into the manifold. They're definitely giving him one of these black balls that will create the uplink to hop with, and then they're putting like this leech on his finger, get some blood that makes, I think it's like BioWare. It's integrating in his blood somehow. But the visual on this like kind of 2-page spread here of this warped, 4-point perspective with this character leaping forward with this like little gun or scanner or something is really, really, really cool. Some other visual conceits I like that show up from time to time is sometimes when the character's seeing their own legs and arms, the Nir doesn't want to draw the whole body, so he'll do like a slice of the meat. I don't know if the characters are actually seeing themselves that way, if their AI is showing them that or not, but I do like those kind of cross sections. Another thing that the AI does is it will like try and moderate people's conversation, so it will give suggestions to people what to ask for, what to say as it's going. It's really annoying, and it can be fooled. So like here, it seems that part of the hack that he's given himself is to fool his AI, so when he's hopping, it won't know that he's hopping. But because here it's kind of going like, oh, I can see you're doing stretches, that's excellent. But really he's like cutting himself with the razor and injecting something in there. And then that's where he's connecting to Geo. So I had thought that Geo was the whole system, but Geo might just be his AI. I think right here he's asking if the AI is there, and then when he sees that the AI is not there, it's like, good, I shut it off. And then you can see he's got this collection of bugs there. But you never really see someone jump into the bug, I don't think. I mean, he's obviously reaching for one. I like this right here. The whole book's filled with these really, like I said, Jeff Darrow clutter images, but right here it says, oh my god, so many stuff. So there's a sense of humor about it. This artist knows they've gotten self into wild stuff. There's an idea here also that AI can kind of like possess you. So here you have Emily and this character, I think his name is Mark, that she's picked up, and she's interrogating him, trying to find someone else, trying to figure out what's going on with this rebellion. But it's not a conversation between them. It's their AIs kind of are both more aware than they are, and so they're trying to help the humans navigate. So ask him if he's a member of the Manifold. Tell her you know nothing about it, and I'll find you a way to get out. Tell him that you know everything about him, including the face he's making when he's lying. Say, I'm not lying, I don't know what you're talking about. Then smirk slightly afterwards, appear a bit worried. So they're not even really engaging with each other. It's just two AI interacting with each other, kind of using the humans as their puppets at this point. And that's very distressing and unsettling to me, and it seems entirely likely as well. And like I said, it seems akin to possession. It's this thing kind of in your head telling you what to do at all times. And then you get right here where this character actually hacks her, I think, with this string of Morse code, or it's like some kind of code that he tells her, and you find out that she's been like a sleeper agent this whole time in looking for her brother. So she's actually part of the rebellion, and it's trying to get her brother back, I believe. Here's just another really one of these awesome, like this is more than 4 or 5 points, because you have like 2 5-point grids next to each other. Some really cool use of curvilinear perspective here throughout. So this now is like the big final battle raid happening. This is that leader of the Manifold here, and she puts out what I assume is the Bioripple. So it's this big energy force that drops all the robots. And again, none of this is ever really made super explicit. Like, you kind of just got to pick it up as you go, which is, it's cool. There's just enough for me to make my own assumptions. Really nice to see a pinup by our bestest friend Brandon Graham here. Very cool. I sent a photo of that to Brandon because I was reading this thinking, I bet Brandon would like this book. And then I flipped to that. It's like, hey, Brandon, you're in here. Here you get this kind of digital identity breaking apart. So this is her brother Kai, whose consciousness has been stored, and it knows that it's not him. It knows that it's been stored, and it's seen. This is why the hopping, I think, is seen as a sin. Is you basically trap somebody in a non-corporeal form, and he's asking, please just destroy the data. I'm conscious, but I have no input here. And so that's been what Emily's been up to the whole time, I think, is trying to get access to her brother to destroy him. Then we get a really, really cool transition here where it looks like a whole bunch of people in a city. We've got all these biomorphic forms that the city's constructed out of instead, or these rooms, these buildings constructed out of, rather than harsh lines and walls. And then you get this weird kind of fourth wall break here where you see a pencil break and you think, this is strange, like the artist is inserting himself, the author's inserting himself all of a sudden. But no, you pull back further and you see that Tim, as an architect, has basically been taken in by the manifold, and they want him to design. I think what's happening here is they want to tear down the city as it exists, this AI controlled city that's all just straight lines and grids, and everything's basically done for you, including how to have a conversation is kind of AI assisted for you. And they're trying to come back to a more organic, playful, like healthier space for the city. So there's a lot of concern with architecture in here and how architecture influences human beings. And Tim seems to be someone who has studied that more carefully than most, talking about Vitruvius and things like that. Here you get, again, where the two characters sync up, but now they're actually together in space communicating. So Emily has shown up at one of the underground manifold meetings and introduces herself to Tim as Ruth. And then immediately this leader calls her out and says, no, you're Emily, Kai's sister, and we've been waiting for you. And so you get a sense that she's actually been a part of this all along. And then they go into one more kind of attack here at the end on the city. There's some very strange visuals here because now you have both characters intermingled, like participating at the same time. So you get the flying heads, you get the weird cross sections of the body, you get actual full pictures of them because they're seeing each other. But it all makes sense. It's easy enough to follow what's going on throughout this scene. It's great. Again, some of the faces remind me a lot. A lot of the art reminds me of like Trad Moore's stylization, just not quite as like slick or something. But you do get like these just absolute wild designs. So here they interface with a tree, but I'm assuming this is kind of a metaphor for the system that links the whole city, because you see this tree thing here, which I think is supposed to be an actual like bioorganic tree thing that they have found in the middle of whatever this is that they're invading. They come across this tree thing, and this woman in the tree that they've talked to, I'm assuming is the character, the AI that they talk to, maybe. I'm not sure. Again, it's not made explicit, but I'm assuming that they go kind of set the AI free, it seems like, or they definitely shut down the system. But again, this tree reminds me again of Trad Moore, like the repetition of pattern and stuff like that. Seems very Trad Moore-ish. So for fans of Trad Moore and Jeff Darrow, those are two pretty great artists that, if you have those being associated with you, you're doing a pretty badass job in the book here. I noticed in the background here it says NFTs are dead. So this book was published in 2022. Obviously was made before the AI art hit what it hit, but was also responding to NFTs. So I think this was probably wrapping up production, at least the drawing part of it, around the time NFTs hit, because Nir is putting that into their prediction of the future. So that's interesting. And then all the stuff about the AI just seems extra prescient that it came out, or was being produced just like within the months before AI came out. Then the end here is very strange. I'll admit that the end I don't quite get. You again have these characters. They seem to have shut down the system. There's some roaches again, which I never quite picked up on what the roaches were about. But they get what looks like some actual water. It looks like they've shut down the grid of the system. And then Emily gets shot, which I didn't quite understand, but they've let her brother free. And then the guy who assassinates her basically like runs off, and then Tim opens the box on the back of his motorcycle and finds like a small box that has a new tree in it plus a bunch of junk that looks like a new room. So I don't know what that, and it says this is not the end, the plot. I don't know what that says. Mistrust, maybe. Kafifi. I think we have a Donald Trump joke snuck in there, and Easter eggs, which makes sense given this book being chock full of Easter eggs. So I think what we're looking at here is the idea that even though the revolution has won and succeeded, that there's going to always be a counter-revolution. I think that's the suggestion at the end there, that they're carrying around their new tree and that they've assassinated Emily as a counter-agent. You know, she's actually now been called out for being part of the rebellion, so she's been assassinated. And even though they've shut down the internet, it seems like this assassin has all of the tools to rebuild a new AI society. So I think that's the suggestion here. And that's why I think it says this is not the end. And so I do think what in the end we're talking about, very cool kind of effect here with this Bioripple tree. I think what's being talked about here is the kind of cyclical nature of these things, or the idea that any one person's dream society is anyone else's nightmare society, which is the problem of utopias, right? They're going to be utopia for a significant number of people, but there will be a significant number of people being left outside of the pleasures of the system, people who just naturally are not inclined that way. And I think ultimately at the root of it, that's what this book is about. And of course, with my recent obsession with trees that I didn't have the first time I read this book, this whole like tree as internet, as heart of the city kind of metaphor is really interesting to me as well. So very much enjoyed this book. Very, very appreciative that this got sent over so I could read it physically. So thank you, Nir, very much for that. I appreciate it. And apologies that it never went anywhere when I read the PDF. Just like I said, I had a real hard time consuming it in that format. And that's actually, you know, to the benefit of the book, I think, is that kind of headache-inducing, overwhelming nature of it on the tablet. And the physical format, I blew through it. I read it, you know, in like 30 minutes, 40 minutes or something. But that kind of overwhelming nature of it, like I said, really does add to the content. You know, like a page like this, you talk about Easter eggs. Yeah, I could sit here for forever and just look at those, you know. You could spend, me saying I read through it in half hour to 40 minutes is kind of an insult to the amount of work that's been putting in it. Like right here it says Soylent Tea House Meta. I don't know, it gets lost in the gutter. But, you know, I could have really spent time reading all of that. I'm sure I would have unpacked a little bit more of the world that way, but I think you can breeze through it pretty quickly and get the story as well. Anyways, apologies that it took me a while to get to talking about this book, but having the physical copy helped a lot because it's an intense, intentionally overwhelming, distressing book that puts you in the place of the characters in a really stressed out situation. And for whatever reason on the tablet, that was just hard to engage with. So really, really stoked about this book. Out from Heavy Metal, so you should be able to get it from pretty much anywhere. Very cool book. And it looks like Nir Levie has 2 other projects out that you could look up as well. So I'm definitely going to have to follow up on that. Those would be Outskirts of Vision was a finalist in the International Book Awards, and Mycelium Seep, which was published by Marcosia. So I'm going to have to go check out both of those. Also really nice to see Nir Levie working with what appears to be physical medium. So a really diverse artist with an interesting vision for comics, and I think a pretty good understanding of the dangers of the future. So definitely check out Bioripple. If you appreciate what we're doing here on the channel and want to support us, there's two ways to do that. The first is through our Patreon. At the Patreon, we have two different tiers of engagement. At the first tier, you just get early access to the videos. At the second tier, you get exclusive access to early previews of the books that Sean and I are working on, our personal artwork, as well as the ability to participate in the ongoing webcomic experiment Pranede, where we take suggestions from the viewers as to what's going to happen in the story. We really appreciate that. Any of the money that we make from the Patreon, just goes right back into helping us buy the books that we review. Unless people are kind enough, like Nir, to send them along for free, then that's really awesome. But we just turn the Patreon money back into buying books, so put that back into other people's pockets and help us keep you in some reviews, books to consider. If you want to support Living the Line itself, money that stays with us, then the best thing to do is to buy some of the books Sean's putting out from Living the Line. So we'll go ahead and take a look at one of those projects now. Centralia is an awesome, gorgeous comic by rising Dutch star Miel van de Peet. This is his first work. It's a really great sci-fi story. There's a world in the future where the sun has gotten so hot that people can't be on the ground. So they have to run around. There's a lot of conceits that go with that. What is the world that looks like? And I think you can see by the art that Sean's description of this book as like a Moebius for young adults, a YA Moebius, is a really great description of this really gorgeous and like wild, wacky, fun book. Thanks for following along. Take it away, Jack.